What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Non-Standard Podcast. I'm your host, Manny Lampson, and I look forward to this revamped version with Travis. He is a strength conditioning coach currently with the Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape team at Fairchild Air Force Base in the U.S. Air Force. He helps teach the prep team and the current team going through tech school and also the SERE guys after. So he is going outside of his comfort zone. He came from a Haskell strength conditioning job, then went to the private sector, doing his own thing, opened a couple businesses on that side, and then jumped into the military to be a strength conditioning coach there. This is the second episode here. The first one, we had some editing issues and headphone stuff, so we just did it again, and it was just as good. If you listen to the first one, I highly recommend you listen to this one. If you haven't, this is a perfect time to listen to it. A couple of things we cover: grit, persistence, just starting, not waiting for the perfect time, Alpha Dad. We do cover some of that in there. Some of you have been following my social media. I hit that pretty hard. Just the things to help you get started on your journey. So with that being said, if you have taken anything from my podcast, all we ask for is a share, save, like, or follow. It goes a long way, honestly. I don't ask for much. I've just started doing this, but it's appreciative, you know? We love it when we see our podcast shared. When I say our or we, anybody that does a podcast, if you can just share it, save it, comment on it, it means a lot. So with that being said, let's get into this episode. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Manny Mustache, and I'll leave Travis's info as well in the show notes. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to, I say, another episode of the Non-Standard Podcast, but it'll be part 2, part 1 with Travis. So if you guys did listen to Travis's, we found out there was like some delay, a little skipping out with headphones, but it's no worry. Great thing about this is we can just do it all over again. People can listen to it, and we'll talk about more and better things. But we'll cover everything the same. Just like I mentioned in the intro about Travis's background a little bit, we'll dive into that. And then I have questions as well. I'll ask him to follow up with just some leadership stuff. But let's just dive into it. Travis, just like before, but we'll say like we've never heard it before, the 3 H's: hometown, heroes, hardships, and then we'll talk about your career a little bit, the diversity you've had in your career, and where it's led you to today.
All right. Well, hometown, Newcastle, Indiana, small town, 45 minutes east of Indianapolis. So heroes, I'd say my mom, as far as, I was raised in a single parent home, and she managed to get everything done, provide a great upbringing for me. So I was just, especially now that I'm a parent, just very impressed with, I don't know how she made it all work, but anyway, and second hero would be Jon Gordon. I started reading Coach Wooden's books, when I was an undergrad, and just his philosophy, his grit, determination, work ethic, all of it is just very influential to me. Because a lot of people don't realize that he was not, quote, successful as a coach at UCLA very early. And then he didn't deviate. He didn't jump around from school to school. He stayed where he was at and just continued to buckle down and ended up winning, I think, 10 titles with UCLA. So, but yeah, then third one, you said hardship, right? So hardship, I have a difficult time with this one because I was very fortunate to be born, lower middle class in the Midwest in the United States. And I haven't had like a singular hardship that, especially as I talk to more people, interact with more people. So at the very, if I had to draw on something, I remember when I was going through undergraduate, my dad went into cardiac arrest, which is a very scary situation. Unfortunately, he came out of that, got some surgery done. He's good, and he's still alive and kicking today. And right around that same time period, my brother passed away. That was very difficult, kind of having all that, at once. But outside of that, I've been very blessed, very fortunate to have the life and be positioned where I am and surrounded by the people I've been surrounded with. So, just as you interact with more people.
I think, I don't know if we talked about it last time, but that's sort of like how I grew up too. I grew up in a small town, Northern California. I didn't have like that hardship you're talking about that I started to realize when I got in the military.
Mm-hmm.
So going through high school, I had sort of the same group of friends, played sports. It's not like just I guess a normal high school life. Then I joined the military, and that's when I started learning and hearing stories from everybody around me that were just like, oh, I had to deal with this. Or later on when I got into college, hearing those too. And I was like, man, and I think someone asked me that recently as well, as far as like what do I attest as a hardship besides just like joining the military or doing hard things. And I think it's like that imposter syndrome, right? It's a tough thing to deal with sometimes, where you feel like you have to have a story to show you succeeded, but sometimes just not having hardships, but not, that's being like the middle class, you're just like, we're just right there in the middle.
Yep.
That it's an interesting concept, because I had to deal with that same thing when I just sort of started my podcast. Like my wife would ask me like, what was hard about your life? And I was like, well, my parents were nice, like I made it through school. I graduated. I didn't have hardships a little bit later on, but it sort of developed me to be able to handle them, I would say, a little bit better.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was mature enough at a younger age to maybe deal with hardships, so maybe that's why. Being in the military really young, it would have been tough for me as well. But yeah, and so like when you said that, it resonated with me. Like, man, I definitely know where you're coming from. Where sometimes hardships don't have to define you at a young age. It's just they just happen at different times in our lives.
That's true. Yeah. I think it's one of those things of, I just follow the instructions, follow the directions, and it's what I tell my kids all the time. Like, hey, I've done some things that people in my family have never done. Like neither one of my parents went to college, and now I'm working on my PhD, which is awesome. But, like they wanted a better life, and they just told me like, hey, go to school. So just went to school, and school was never easy. It's something I've probably, compared to other people, they would probably learn information a little bit quicker than me. So I just have to spend a little bit more time working. But even then, I don't think of that as a hardship. I've just like done the next logical progression in front of me, so
yeah.
Anyway,
let's talk about Jon Gordon a little bit, man. Because I think what I want to start doing now is diving down into a little bit more of the why these people, right? Now, Jon Wood, I wrote down a couple of things you mentioned. You said he had grit. Define for some people out there, like, what is your definition of grit? How have you seen it in your life? What did you see in Wooden? And then I have another question following with that. So grit, I love the word grit. There's a great book out there on it as well. Why does grit stand out to you so much?
I think it resonates with me because, I'm not the most talented. I'm not the smartest. I don't have, as far as I would evaluate, any form of major advantage. It's definitely not athletically or anything like that. But I have this uncanny ability to, I call it basically just being a cockroach. And what I mean by that is a cockroach that thing's gonna fucking live through a nuclear holocaust and storm and just be there, right? Like, as long as I just keep showing up and just not dying, like I'm just gonna like continue doing what I do. Then over the course of time, my trajectory should be better. Like, I should have a higher probability of reaching what I want as long as I keep showing up. And I see it especially in this profession where people they don't get the opportunities or positions that they want or the pay. And I've went through that. I felt that, but I've just hung around and just continue to hang around one day longer. But I've got probably 100 pages left in the Angela Duckworth Grit book. And I believe she defines it as passion plus perseverance, because I mean, she went out to West Point initially, right? To see like, okay, you have these people who are both academically and athletically gifted, but you don't have 100% success rate. Why is that? And it just came down to basically putting your nose to the grindstone and just fucking working day in and day out. But yeah, that's the.
Yeah, I think that's one thing to consider is it may not be the day you show up. It's coming back the next day that some people want to see. And that's what I love what you talked about is, yes, it's great to always start or show up, but grit is the coming back is where you're going to win.
Yeah.
You get your foot in the door by showing up, but what people want to see is, are you going to come back? Like, I do a lot of hard workouts with a lot of people I meet, and most of the time I get to meet them one time. That's the one workout we do together. But I want to see them come back the next time. And like you said, you're going to outlast a lot of people in jobs or just successful things in life. And that's how some people want to see in young employees. It's not like, hey, did they show up to do the job? It's, did they do it, come back, do it again, come back, fail, come back. That's what I love, the perspective you have on grit.
Yeah.
It's showing up the next day and the next day. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I look
the next question. Yeah, you're good.
Oh, I look at, Coach Wooden's career, over time, like when he got, just because we live in such a microwave society, where everybody wants things like right now, it used to be, more of a slow cooker approach, which I think is better, but people just aren't as patient. And I think part of that's probably our society and culture in general, which is a problem. But what would have, think back to that time when Wooden was coaching at UCLA. What if they wouldn't have given him the first couple years to kind of figure things out? They wouldn't have won 10 titles in all likelihood. So that's how I look at that thing. So.
Yeah, you do not see a lot of coaching like that, businesses like that. Anything as far as the slow. I love the slow cooker analogy you talk about. Like Bill Belichick, right, is maybe the last generation of slow cooker coaches out there, where he started with the Browns, moved to the Patriots, didn't really, I think he's probably one of the last generation of slow cooker. Andy Reid, he jumped into a pretty good franchise there, but when it comes to Belichick did struggle. He did start off pretty slow, and then obviously he just established his dynasty from there. The next question I'll have that I wrote down that you mentioned with Jon Gordon, that it sort of goes right along with persistence.
Mm-hmm.
What do you define persistence as compared to grit?
Okay, that's a good question. I would say if I'm evaluating a decision and I'm trying to decide, is this the right thing to do? If I haven't had any alcohol to drink and I'm like of sober mind and like, I've got a couple buddies around and saying like, hey, does this make sense where I want to go? And everybody's in agreement. Yeah. Okay. This is what I'm going to commit to. So I guess I would say commitment would be the biggest thing. But there's a meme I've seen online of, it's split and there's a dude who has a pickaxe and he's charging away, getting some dirt out behind him. And there's diamonds at the end of it. Right. And he's full bore focused, going towards what he wants to go towards. The dude on the bottom is this close, like an inch away from the diamonds, but he quits. Mm-hmm. I think back to that on a daily basis of like, what if today's the day where I'm hitting those diamonds? Like, what if I was to walk away, to stop? And there's certainly, that's not to say you should never quit, because that's bad advice. There is a time where it is appropriate to quit. And I realize that, that's very counter to what's taught in the military, but there needs to be a time where people understand, let's take a step back, analyze, count our losses, and quit. So, I don't know if that answers the question or not, but that's how I look at it, is like, once I've decided I need to logically evaluate what I want, okay, here's what I'm going to commit to, and then I'm going to be persistent as hell and reevaluate every little while.
Yeah, I look at it as grit gets you there, persistence is going to keep you going, right? So they tag along with each other. And that's sort of the way that picture is what you described it as. And that's where I sort of tied it together. Grit is the guy, just hammering away. Persistence is when he gets to that goal, that's what's going to get him there, because grit can only get you so far. Mm-hmm. Grit's like muscle, right? It's going to tire out. It's going to get smoked. Persistence is the mental side of, hey man, that's what's going to get you there. So I like how you tied that picture in. Grit's going to get you started. Persistence will get you to the end. Nice. Let's talk about the persistency and grit you've had in your progression through strength training. Because we talked about last time, and I still love your progression. And then I also have some follow-on questions with those jobs as well. So where you started your career and where you're at now.
Yeah. So I started when I was, at the Ball State weight room with Coach Jason Roberson as an undergraduate. I was 20. So he came and gave a speech to our exercise science class. I went down and, I was like, hey, I loved your presentation. Can I just hang out and watch and see what you do? And, I just kept showing up day after day and kept bugging the guy. And he was nice enough to like, all right, you're going to be here for a little while. Let me teach you some stuff. And, as I was learning, I wanted to see the application of the theory being applied, which is what got me interested in this stuff, because it's one thing to talk theory and never have somebody come out of their office who actually coaches athletes and interacts and lifts themselves. So I wanted to see real world, how's it work? So that would have been probably 2008, something like that. 2007, 2008 was when I started with Coach Robe. And then just kept hanging around, showing up. And then he kept giving me more and more responsibility. So I started with men's swimming at Ball State. And then that led into, he recommended me for Indiana Pacers strength and conditioning internship with Coach Sean Wendell. And, one thing kept leading into another. So then I graduated from Ball State, decided to go back to school because I was really starting to get interested in, the depths of sport performance. So then I went and got my master's in applied sports science at Indiana University. And while I was at IU, I went up to University of Wisconsin La Crosse because they're one of the better known schools. Studied up there under Coach Kevin Schultz for a semester. Graduated from IU, and then went to Haskell Indian Nations University, which is an all Native American school in Lawrence, Kansas, which was awesome. Especially being from the Midwest where there's not a lot of diversity at all. Especially the town I'm from, like it's like 98% white guys. So like this is now I'm in a position where I'm at Haskell and I have to build rapport with athletes very quickly. And now I'm the minority. And that was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me from a career standpoint, because now I have to build rapport, listen, and then start saying like, hey, here's some things I think can help. So had a 2-year contract there, then went to the private sector. Myself and a buddy of mine, we started our own gym called Evolution Athletics in 2017. And then in 2020, I got the offer up here to come up to SERE side. And I've been at the SERE Schoolhouse as the head strength coach since 2020.
I don't know. What was my questions? Oh, okay. So the questions I have about each one of these jobs.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think each job was going to be like before you started? So it sounds like the Haskell one you probably knew because it's the strength coach side, but what did you have going in? Was it what you thought? And then how did it lead you to the next part? So we'll dive deeper into each sort of job.
Yeah. So Haskell was, I didn't know what to expect from a culture standpoint, so I needed to basically be very quiet and just observe and learn and go around person to person and just, hey, can you explain what's going on here? What's the dynamics like? Because you have a ton of different tribes represented at Haskell. So can you explain the dynamics of how this tribe could potentially interact with this tribe, good and bad? What are the dynamics of the social norms? So that was just things I needed to learn. So I just talked to people and just met people where they were at was just a big thing. So unfortunately in 2014, they got a new school president, and that school president didn't view sports as important. And therefore my job was not important to her. So I completely disagree, because I think sports in many situations has saved tons of people, like literally saved their lives, because you have people coming out of inner cities. You have people who are out in the countryside that are, on a clear trajectory of making a couple bad decisions that could change their life forever. And then sports gets introduced. Well, now they can focus their time and extra energy on sports. So anyway, that was, very frustrating because I enjoyed my time at Haskell. I would, maybe still be there if it wasn't for that. But anyway, moved to the private side starting in 2014 and then opened EA in 2017. And, that was a whole different side of things of learning, hey, what's it mean to be self-employed? Your income is different each month. You need to learn systems. You need to learn a little bit of how to read a profit and loss statement, just all these basic business things that you're never around because you got into strength and conditioning to do strength and conditioning. But EA is still crushing it in Lawrence, Kansas. And, my buddy's doing a great job with it. And, same thing when I got up here to SERE is, went through the same process where I didn't know what to expect, especially culturally. So I've just shut up for the first month or two and talked to people and watched how things were ran. And then I pulled some people aside and asked if I could do this, do that. And then they saw that it worked and it worked really well. So then I got a little bit more of a rope. And then it's turned into, fortunately, one of those places where I have a lot of say as far as the physical preparation, and people understand where I'm coming from, and I make sure I understand where they're coming from. So
I think one thing I want people to consider and remember here is your journeys weren't like planned out, to the T what you were going to do right when you started the job, which a lot of people wait for, right? Yeah. They're waiting to start these opportunities, but they're waiting for I have to know exactly what I'm going to do, how much I'm going to get paid, what it takes. Yours were, I don't know what to expect, but I got to start, I got to do something, and then you work it from there. That's probably one of the things I've learned in the past 3 years since I've sort of dived down into outside of military passion, I was very nervous about doing any of this stuff because I was like, well, I don't know anything about online coaching, I don't know how to market. I don't know how to do intake forms or podcasting. I don't know how to edit videos. I still don't. I'm probably not the best at it, but but that's what I want people to realize is you don't have to have all the answers before you start something. And that's the biggest thing I tell people just on the weight loss journey alone is you don't have to have the right time to start your journey because it's never going to happen. Right. That, man, there's never a right time to start anything. If you do, you're just going to be waiting forever.
Exactly. No, that is spot on. If you wait for the right time, you're going to wait your whole life. And there's a book I read a long time ago by a guy named Jon Gordon, and it's called Start. And that's literally the 5 second. So if you want to save yourself time from reading the whole book, it's basically just start. Just jump in and go. If you're an entrepreneur, you're learning how to build the airplane on the way off the cliff that you just jumped off of. And when I moved to Kansas from Indiana, I graduated, got the job at Haskell. I had a 2003 Chevy Malibu. I packed that thing I didn't even have an apartment secured. All right. So I packed it full of my clothes, my computer, and all right, man, I'm just heading west. And I know I got a job. So I stayed in a hotel for a couple days until that, because I didn't even have my first paycheck. I stayed in a hotel and I was like, well, I'll figure a place to live. Lawrence, Kansas is not that dangerous. So, but yeah, so when I finally got an apartment, I didn't have any furniture. I didn't know what to expect, but my apartment ended up getting furnished by people who met me and, thought that I was a good person and went around to a garage sale and got me some stuff. And, it's funny, man, just how stuff works out along the way. There's a little saying of tell God your plans and he'll laugh, kind of thing of, just go and start working and doors will open, but a lot of people, I don't know if it's a lack of faith or if whatever, but they just are scared and they're worried about this and that. And it's like, man, you don't know what can happen tomorrow. You can step outside and get hit by a car. Why worry? So.
I love it. I do think it is a generational shift now for young people to think they have to have everything ready before they start something. I don't know. I don't know when it exactly happened. I assume it had to have happened early 2000s, right? Because you look at our careers and our timeline. When I say early 2000s for the people getting ready to maybe graduate college and start their career, maybe even later that, maybe something happened in 2010s or where there's a shift of, I don't know, like I don't want to struggle anymore. I just want to get into a job and know exactly what it's going to ask me to do. And it's all ready for me. We don't see a lot of this. Just go forth, who knows what's on the other side of the rainbow as long as you climb the rainbow. But what we do see is people that do it, they're pretty successful.
Yeah.
It's very small pot, but there are a lot of people out there who have done some pretty good jobs just starting.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, let's talk about the military. So obviously for those listening, I've been in for 18 years. Travis has been around it for a couple years now. Behind the scenes, it doesn't sound like you had a big military background before you got this job. What were some expectations that you heard of? What was it like when you got there? What's it like dealing with a bunch of knuckleheads that think they're gods and own the world?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I just got done having lunch a moment ago with a crow, and we were talking about, what personality types are attracted to which fields. Because I think I don't want to insult anyone by saying like, hey, attack P is like this athlete, because when athlete gets tossed in there, people are like, oh, you think it's a game? It's like, no. I'm just saying that baseball players have their own personality, right? And then football has their own personality. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I think the same is true in my time that I've been here at SERE side. Is like I've met 18 Deltas, Stows, Crows, SERE. They all have their own different PJs. They all have their own different personalities. And my personality is very laid back. I'm like, hey, I don't know, like just I'm gonna sit here and listen. You tell me, and then I'll tell you some information if I think I can help. But I have definitely observed like guys who are extremely alpha. Just it's like watching two Rams just go head to head, and I just stay the hell out of the way and let those guys work it out. And then if they have questions on physical prep, like I know my wheelhouse and I'm very confident there, and I just stay out of the way. But it's been great. I really enjoy my time here. I felt like this is one of those things where I don't want to say destined, but definitely like I'm meant to do this. I'm meant to be kind of the I don't want to say voice of reason, but just I have a different way of stepping back and looking at things logically without the emotion, because I have no prior military experience. I'm just a subject matter expert, and I do a good job of listening and hearing people out without giving feedback one way or another. And I think that's because at the end of the day, everybody wants a few things. Everybody wants to hear their name. They want to know that they're loved, and they want to feel heard. That's it. So if you understand that as a coach, you can make a hell of a difference, because then if you're satisfying those three things, you don't have to go and say like, hey, I love you and blah, blah, blah. You can show your love different ways. And especially if you try to do that on SERE side, guys will be like, what the fuck are you doing, you weirdo? But it's one of those things of like, you can show your love different ways by saying like, hey, I care about you and I don't want this to happen, which is why I'm going to educate you on this, this, and this. And then when people feel that you actually care about them and you legitimately give a shit, then they're all ears all day long. But yeah, I really enjoy my time here. I think I have the best job in the military.
Yeah. So for those not familiar with what we're talking about, because this can happen, as we get to know each other. Travis is a civilian working for the military. So it's newer. It's probably been going on the past, I say 5 years, where a lot of special warfare, physically fit military jobs are hiring strength conditioning coaches to improve their athletes or their airmen or warriors. I love the transition. I love the focus, and it's great because that's my background. But what I've seen, and what Travis has done a great job of, is the military can be real stubborn. So if we're taking orders or listening to somebody that hasn't done what we've done, or doesn't do the same job, or just isn't in the military, it's tough. Like I've been in those shoes where someone has tried to tell me what to do, And I'm like, yo, like, you don't even know what I'm about to do with this skill you're trying to teach me. Like Travis has said, he came in, he sat back, he listened. And one of the things I'll hit a little bit later is you built relationships, you got to know people, you figured out what they needed, you appreciate them. And then when you were ready, you're like, okay, guys, here's what I need you to do. And then they understood it. They appreciated it. They listened to you. And so, yeah, so for those listening, he teaches survival, evasion, resistance, escape instructors and the pre-team guys that are getting ready to become instructors. So 2 different worlds that he's sort of balancing strength conditioning programs for. The pre-team side is very much going to be, it's tough. It's a lot harder physically on the body to get these guys ready to withstand the training. And then he's focusing on the guys who are there, keeping them rehabbed, keeping them more accustomed to what they're doing, and then to the longevity. So that's pretty cool there. Let's see, what was I going to yeah, do you have anything else to add on that? Or
No, that's spot on. I mean, the pre-team is very intense physical development, and then the team is like basically fatigue management because of the rigors of the training. Yeah. I mean, it is a very tough pipeline. And yeah, I think having some empathy and some sympathy and just listening to people goes a very long way. So then people are much more receptive to what you have to say when it's your turn to speak, but yeah.
One question I'll throw out there right now that I had written down today. You've already talked about it a couple times, culture. It's a huge word, right? It's huge in the strength side and the team side. It's huge in the military. My question is, and I have a couple of them, how do you develop culture either in a weight room or on a team from your side of the house? What do you have any say, or is it one of those things as a strength coach where you're coming into a program and you're just trying to fit into that culture? Or like, how's that work?
Yeah. So as far as the SERE side, and I have one of the reasons I love my job so much is the autonomy that I have. And I'm a big believer in, just because I have this like assigned title, or assigned respect does not equal earned respect. It does not equal earned power. So it's one of those things, if you have to earn it every single day. But it's one of those topics where I remember the first time I was given the reins to kind of like, all right, here, it's all yours, you take it. I could feel, I'm sure you felt this before, when you can feel eyes on you that are just judging the shit out of you, that are thinking like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Because these guys have never really been introduced to training and recovery and like how the whole apparatus works, right? So I saw guys coming in who were currently on team, and that was the first group I was working with, and they legitimately couldn't feel their fingers, fam hands, and their feet weren't working. They didn't know when their feet were making contact with the ground. I mean, there was a ton of issues that are just beyond my control due to the nature of the course. So rather than drive the guys in the ground, which had traditionally been done, I was like, hey, we're actually going to do a rehab circuit today. And I could hear the whispers. I could feel the eyes on me because all the cadre were like, who's this new guy? This is stupid. And this is where I committed to like, no, I don't want to put this the wrong way. I don't want to say fuck everybody else, but I was just so self-assured where I know what I'm doing was right, that I'm not going to deviate and be influenced by external forces. So I stayed the course, did what I knew needed to be done, and guys felt better. And then when they feel better, then they can put out. And then when they're putting out, now cadre are happy. Now admin is happy. So it's a matter of just like communicating, and yeah, we're going to have hard days for sure in training, but we're also going to have easy days. And I know that whole thing of like, no easy days. Well, you have to have easy days so that you can actually go hard on the hard days. So it's just communicating and explaining to people what you're doing, and then making sure they're part of the process in some capacity. Like, all right, cool. You guys can have 2 hard days per week. What days do you want them to be? Cool. I'll take the other days and we'll recover. And you can do whatever the hell you want with them on the hard days. But it's just comes down to those relationships, just those know, like, and trust. Like, you're building those relationships over time. And as people know you more and understand where you're coming from and what you're trying to do, the culture improves. So proof of culture would be this morning. When I got here 4 years ago, nobody would be foam rolling or using a lacrosse ball or body tempering or stretching or doing suitcase carries. Well, when I walked in this morning, I saw all of that being done. I was like, holy crap, man. For me, that's a massive shift where like I didn't tell those guys to do that. I've empowered them over time by educating them to now, here's the underlying principles of strength training and performance and conditioning. Here's the underlying principles. The methods you want to do, fine. Just stick with the principles. So now it's become like, it's cool to rehab because you know if somebody's rehabbing, they're going to have a freaking hard day tomorrow. So it's different here than, like, I work with the local fire department with my little side hustle, Dynamic Human Performance. But the fire department has a little bit different culture than that because of there are different points in their career and all sorts of different dynamics. But it's all different. It's just, you got to take your time, get to know people, explain what's going on, and explain the 30,000 foot view.
Yeah, that led me into my next question. I think you just answered it. It was going to be, for those people that are new to a job, how do you establish culture and what to expect? And I'm going to basically recapture what you just said. Got to give it time. Like, I don't think people realize you just said it took you 4 years to realize the culture has shifted. 4 years, people were like, what? We were just talking about the slow cooker aspect of proficiency in jobs, and he just reiterated that concept again. It's not going to be, culture isn't one in a day or 3 months or in like a season, right? For sports perspective, or in a team perspective, for 6 months of tech school. It's it was your 4 years. Some of the other things I think you mentioned for somebody who's trying to fit into a culture job is, you said obviously getting to know the people is a huge one. So building relationships, because my culture may not mend or well with the new culture I'm going into. So I can't take my culture in there. You hit that too. What are some examples of bad culture? You don't have to say where you saw it, but for some people to realize, sometimes we may not know we're in bad culture, but if we hear from other people like what it looks like, then we can walk in and be like, oh shoot, I'm in a bad culture place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the things of, I don't want to sound like hippie-ish or yoga-like or anything, but it's like you can feel it. Like there is like an energy feel. Like I can walk in a weight room at this point because I've been around enough athletes. It doesn't matter where. I can walk in and be like, something is just, and those people are called empaths, right? So like, I don't have it nearly as highly developed as my wife, but my wife, she'll walk in a room and she's like, something is wrong. Like there is some tension somewhere. And that's a real thing. And people scoff at it and they're like, it's stupid, but it's a real thing. But as far as indicators of culture, I look out here right now and I can see the weight room and I can see how many guys have their earbuds in right now versus how many do not. So like the dudes that don't are shooting the shit, having fun, hanging out. They enjoy being around each other. They enjoy working together. I can listen to the gossip, not necessarily here, but like other places when somebody comes in and they just start talking shit about somebody else. Okay, well, why is that happening? Is that due to like poor culture, or is that the individual and they just don't feel like they have anybody else to talk to? But also, actions speak louder than words, so if I'm coming in and telling people they need to do this, this, and this while they train, well, I need to make sure that I demonstrate that and people see me lifting. People see me doing conditioning. People see me going through the grind. So they know like, all right, this guy's doing it too. Like he's not just telling us, So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think those are the things I look for. Feeling is big. And then also like, what's the team doing? Is the team interacting? Are they having fun? Are they gelling? Are they just like, all right, I'm going to put up with this guy because I have to? Do they hang out outside of work?
No, that answered it completely. Because I look at it from, now I'm going to take what you did. And for those listening who are in like a an office job or an Air Force job or something like that, where you're working as a task oriented, like a bunch of people working together to get one thing done. He hit on a couple already. The communication in an office or a space, right? Is it quiet when you get in there? Are people just sitting at a computer, just head down with their headphones in, focusing on only themselves? Do they know each other well? Like that's like, if I could test the culture of a place, if I were just to walk into an office and be like, "Hey, how's Susan doing today?" to somebody else, and they go, "Who's Susan?"
Yeah.
Or like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't talk to Susan." Okay. Or you were talking about getting together, right? That's a huge thing of culture is, "Hey, what are you guys doing for lunch? Is everybody going on their own, or do you guys have lunches planned?" Those are the small, minute things that can add up into a culture place, but also you can tell and determine what culture is like. So for those listening, just to recapture, culture takes time. It's not easy. I believe it does grow from the ground up. We had a discussion today in my office as far as, is culture top down or bottom up? Because we hear a lot in the military, our leaders always talk about culture, when they go to a new place, like, "Oh, the culture." And we hear it in sports, right? Sports talk a lot about it as well. The culture's bad. Let's get a new coach. He'll change the culture. We've learned coaches don't change cultures, man. Like, the team is what's changing the culture. The culture starts from the team. The team is the bottom. Like, I posted a picture on my LinkedIn. It was of a flower, a plant growing, right? Is culture the rain or the roots or the soil? And so that's something to consider there. It's a good question because it could be either. You can have good coaches or leaders that will make a good culture. Like, it's been proven too, right? Like, some coaches have come into a community or leaders and made the culture better. But maybe it's just that culture was waiting for the right, leader or boss to help. But it's hard to take. I would say, I think if I were to flip it, it'd be a little bit tougher. But yeah. Anyway, so yeah. My next question is more on the leadership side. How do you lead in a new job? Yours is definitely, I say, tougher to lead in because you're coaching. You're not per se like with the team all the time, and you've already hit a couple of them, but I want to see if you reiterate them. What are some things for young leaders to do if they want to start being an impactful leader, but not do the normal leadership thing where it's like jump in and you're like, "Okay, guys, do exactly as I say because I'm a leader and you need to know it." What are some subtle things you can do?
Yeah, I think that some big things you can do is, before I really had my first role, like as a head coach, it was, I didn't just, work with Coach Roberson and Coach Schultz and Coach Wendell. It wasn't just those guys. It was, yeah, they were a big part, but I also immersed myself around other coaches. There's other people I didn't mention that freaking sucked. They were terrible. And how do I know that they're terrible? Because I continue to surround myself with more and more coaches and interact with more and more coaches. And it's not just coaches either. I think a big part is getting out of your field and learning from people outside of your field, because your field will become very incestuous over time, where you'll have people who say the same thing, do the same thing. They don't think outside the box. It's always been done this way. Ugh, just gross. And they don't challenge traditional thought. Like, okay, as an example, the 8-hour workday, right? Where'd that stem from? It stemmed from Henry Ford.
I hate it.
Yeah, it stemmed from Henry Ford because he deemed it the most efficient thing for an assembly line. Is that true? No.
Yep.
Because it's not true, because there's something called Parkinson's law, which says that work expands to fill the time available. So it's just
I
those
love that.
things
That's good.
of like, man, you just have to like challenge traditional thought. Are you going to piss off some people along the way? I fucking hope so. Because if you're not pissing people off, you're not doing your job. You're not pushing things. Like, people just get caught up in this, I call it loops of like, they just are on autopilot. They're not thinking. They're just, and you need to be okay with that too. Like, if you're not, you'll probably advance in your career or whatever, but how are you going to live with yourself at the end of the day? Like, is being an entrepreneur scary? Yeah, it's very scary. But at the same time, I think about, if I live to be an old man and my kids ask me one day and they're like, hey, did you ever take any chances in your life? I think about my daughters and think about like, what if I looked them in the face and I was like, nope, I always played it safe. To me, that's terrifying. So I wanted to be able to tell them, yeah, I took some chances and yeah, it was scary, but I wouldn't have changed anything. It was a fun ride. So I think about stuff like that. But I have no idea what your original question was. I'm just ranting at this point because I had too much coffee. But
no, you hit on a couple of topics I'll follow up with right now. The 8-hour day, I hate it, and it's a devastating thing in the military because we live by it, and it pisses me off. Like this whole you have to show up at a certain time and leave at a certain time. Like my workday is not 8 hours. I'll say it right now, but I am very effective in the 2 to 3 hours I'm at work, checking my emails, doing my task, bouncing between meetings, going to lunch, getting my PT in, doing other things because I don't physically work 8 hours a day in the military. I'll say that right now. I work maybe 3 to 4 effective hours a day. And here's the rest of my day. I have lunch. I eat at the office. I PT for 45 minutes. So that's an hour with the showering in between. I read. I do other tasks because I got my side hustles and passions too. So I break those up in between the day. But when I am working on a task, be it the military, my podcast, or my first form, I'm executing. I'm not wasting time. That's why I say I don't need 8 hours a day to be effective.
Right.
I get more done in the 3 hours of my workday than most people will in probably 2 days in the military because they are so dang behind on things or procrastinating. My inbox is clean. I have a very clean, structured email inbox. 4 years ago, Manny would have thought that was the most creepiest Blue Air Force thing in the world. But I have seen how it's made me more productive because I've seen people with cluttered email boxes and they're like, and they brag about it. They're like, I got 1,000 emails. And I'm like, I have 0 unread emails in my military email. I have folders that structure them because I don't need to spend 45 minutes going through my emails, figuring out, being stressed out about all the emails I see. And that's what I love about this shift in some successful people. We're just really good. And a lot of people will ask, how do you do so much stuff? Or I don't have the time. I'm like, dude, we all have the same time.
Yep.
I just make my time pretty dang detailed out. And some people are like, oh, well, you don't do this, but you do this. I'm like, that's true because I pick and choose what things are impacting my life 5 or 7 years down the road, not bogging me down from a week ago. So there was the 8-hour thing you hit. You covered that. Shoot, there was a couple other things in there as well, but I'll ask you another question as well. And you sort of hit this. In the strength conditioning, this is a huge question. How do you stay creative but realistic in the fitness world? So this is a fitness world question for people listening because there's a lot of fads, right, in the strength conditioning and the nutrition and the fitness world. So how do you keep getting ahead? Because I guarantee you there's a lot of your clients or a lot of your airmen that are probably like, oh, I saw these guys doing this cool thing over here. Why hasn't Travis done this with us yet? Does he know about it? Does he know what he's doing? It's tricky.
Yeah. And so there's I think it's different person to person as far as, one of the biggest piece of advice I can give people is meet people where they're at and get the lowest hanging fruit initially to start building some momentum and buy-in. So with a lot of the military, I didn't realize how many, especially SERE guys, are broken physically and they hurt, and understandably so, with the jumps, the rucking, and no recovery, no sleep, no nutrition. I think, and obviously I'm sure I've been influenced and biased a little bit, this might be even harder than some PJ and CCT and TAC-P stuff because the SERE guys who do this stuff are in a caloric deficit. They're not allotted the same, their days don't end at 5 o'clock. It's you go until it's done. So I think it's just a different approach. But anyway, with that, I think that people need to get the lowest hanging fruit possible first. So for a lot of those guys, it's, hey, let's work on some ankle mobility. If your ankle feels better, your knee problem will probably clear up. If your ankle and knee clear up, your low back and hips will feel better. So just getting small buy-in pieces. because some people are super married to and bought in with like their program. And it's like, cool, I'm not even going to touch that yet because we're not there. But if I can improve their performance just by getting them to move better and feel better by doing like little stuff, oh, okay, well, maybe they'll buy in bigger to the programming aspect. And you're right, there are a ton of fads that come and go. So here's what I look at is a couple things. In the history of strength training, there's a great book by Terry Todd that goes into like the history of strength training in America. That goes all the way back to like 1700s, 1800s. So look at the biggest, strongest people along the way. What were they doing? Deadlifting, overhead pressing, squatting, the basic stuff, carrying. So all these fads are just repackaging shit that's already, and they're overselling the small stuff where they're like, hey, do this leg curl, leg extension, lateral lunge on a machine, ab and ab. How about you just squat and deadlift, man? Is there more stuff you can do? Sure. Do you need it? Probably not, because your strength is not at a acceptable level where that is deemed necessary. But you have to give people what they need and a little bit of what they want. So I was at a commander's call, like I gave a presentation at a commander's call yesterday, and I'm up there talking about my principles of strength training, how I go about things. And then afterwards, there were a couple guys that came over and had some more questions. There was one guy who's 19, and he's clearly never lifted before, which is awesome because I have a clean slate. And he shows me his program on his phone, and it's just like pages long of, I don't know, 12 exercises per session. I was like, hey, man, I was there, but let me save you a ton of time and frustration. Put your energy into these big movement patterns. And he's like, yeah, but what about my arm? Like, he kept all these what about. Cool, dude. But like, if you get strong, your arms will look freaking great. If you get strong, your shoulders will look great. Like, you don't need to do all the isolation. But it's just a process in getting people to understand. And then I have a bunch of great examples of walking around the weight room of, there's a guy in here who deadlifts 700 pounds. And he also runs a sub 6-minute mile. That is, like, you don't run across that every day. What the fuck? So what's driving what? What's the biggest, strongest, baddest dude doing? Squatting, deadlifting, carrying. And so you can have your little derivatives and changes there, but at the end of the day, you got to do the big foundational fundamentals. Do you want to have deep roots, or do you just want to be fancy but not really useful?
I think you hit on a leadership trait that I've covered in a few of mine. It's get good at the basics. Like, you can master the basics, you'll just be that much better. Yeah. And this comes just to life and work in general, not just strength training.
Oh yeah.
I've talked to people before, and we've come to the realization, like, if you can master the basics of your job, of being a good father, of the little things, you're going to see greater growth than making big changes fast.
Yep.
That's what a lot of people have a hard time doing. Like, I talk about it in the macro world a lot, right? Like, hey guys, to get good results from your nutrition, focus on the basics. Eat good protein, eat less than you burn, drink water. You'll see results. But they're like, well, what if I cut out all my carbs, or I don't eat during these hours? Or I'm like, no, give me this for like 6 months. And they're just like, 6 months? I can't do that for 6 months. And I'm like, you can't do that for 6 months. How do I expect you to cut out carbs for 21 days if that's what you're going to do?
Mm-hmm. No, that's perfect, because Travis Mash has a lot of really good sayings, but one of them is master the mundane. Is it exciting to drink this much water?
Yeah,
like, it's not, but it's what's necessary. It's like step one. And you have to master the mundane. I realize it's not sexy, it's not fun, but like, is it cool to be, and you'll feel better. You're going to be out of pain if you're stronger and you're good at these absolute in ranges with external load. You're just going to feel better. The body has a nice way of kind of working itself out of things. But people get so obsessed with like, oh, well, I got to do blah, 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 blah. well, have you even broken a sweat today? You know? So I don't know. That's my
Man, you hit the nail on the head there. Consistency is boring. It
yeah.
is not, it's not flashy. Like, I tell people it all the time. You see it all the time. And this is just like one of those lines you can throw out there, man. Consistency is not boring. It's doing the same small things every dang day, over and over and over and over again. Like, I'll get people that'll be like, hey, Manny, I hit my weight goal. What do I do now? I'm like, I'll do the same thing. For how long? 3 more years?
Well,
And they're like, what?
yeah. And I meant to say this earlier.
That's a huge thing. People don't.
I meant to say this earlier because I think with programming, a lot of it is, yeah, we'll have the same principles and basic exercises, but we'll need different doses, different variations based on personality of the individual. Because some people need the novelty, even though like it's still a deadlift, but it's just a nuance of like, oh, but it's different. It's like, it's still deadlifting. So as long as we're still deadlifting. But other people are like, nope, I'm doing the same friggin' thing, just more weight or whatever. So I'm big with the personality, seeing how that works out.
Let's shift gears to one of my other big topics I love on social media is an alpha dad. Obviously, being in shape dads, we're trying to change this world of philosophy of dad bods. You being a father, what tips do you have? What have you seen as far as leading by example for your children, doing hard things? For people to listen and be like, hey, Manny's not the only one, or, like, this shift has to happen. I've seen it in my kids' shows where, like, the dads are just, like, lazy. They're lackadaisical. They're passive. They're pushovers, and I'm like, what are you watching, dude? Like, where's, like, my dad on a TV show that's, like, the father like, the father figure of the house, which, what do you got for people out there that are on that journey?
Yeah, I think it is concerning from a cultural and societal standpoint when you have all the dads being portrayed as stupid, lazy idiots, and that's not a good message to be sending. Like, do it. Like, is Family Guy funny? Yeah, absolutely. But over and over and over again, reiterating and trying to indoctrinate and teach children, like, no, the dad's fat and stupid and lazy. That's not good, man. So, I go to school to pick up my daughter a couple days here and there when I have time. I pick her up from school. And I see some of the other dads and I'm like, man, it's not even that. Like, I make sure to wear extra small shirts, but no, it's but really, like, the concern for me is like, dude, if you're not in shape, you're potentially setting your kid up to die to live without a father, right? Like, if you're not doing cardio of whatever that means for you, if you're not doing cardio, if you're not doing strength training, not only are you not as functional, but you don't offer security for your family. Like, what if you get in a conflict? Size and strength is a big time deterrent for somebody that wants to mess with you and your family. Secondly, if you're trying to pick up your kid, like, I can pick up my kids, no problem. Pick them up, squat down, pick something else up and move along and not think about it. I've seen dads and they're out of breath. They have to tell their kids to walk. Like, like, it's just, what in the hell are we doing here? And it's a, what's the right word here? It's a threat at the end of the day, because now to your family, because now you have dads who have a higher likelihood of cardiovascular disease. I mean, look at the waist to hip ratio, look at the grip strength, look at the leg strength. Those are 3 big indicators of mortality. Oh, and number 1 is, are you male? If you're male, the science says you are likely, I can't remember the percent, but you're far more likely to die sooner. So we need to control what we can control and stop being lazy, not just for us, but for our families. So, and it's not that whole thing, like you mentioned a moment ago about, like, yeah, people go, I don't have time. I did a Tabata this morning. A Tabata takes 4 minutes. Like, I didn't have time. Yeah, okay. You're just being lazy and not prioritizing.
Yeah. I do make it a point to go to my daughter's school in medium shirts. I'm not going to lie. But this is what I tell people. I do it because I was the dad who wouldn't, who was tired, who was lazy. 3 years ago, I wouldn't say I was overweight. I was 217 pounds. I was super strong, don't get me wrong. But I didn't look like it. I was drinking, probably more than I should. I was making excuses to do things. So I was there. And now that I am not there and I am that alpha dad, I do make it a priority to go pick up my kids. I pick up my daughter and raise her above my head every time I pick them up from school. Like I'll look at a dad and do a press with her and just be like, yep. And I go to, same thing as when I go to church, man. I don't wear like the normal church. I'll wear like first form stuff to church, or because my friend and I were just talking about in the church setting, fathers have become very passive as well because they think being a manly person in church is like it's not like religious or something like that. But biblically wise, like the father figures were very like hardworking and like exercise focused and doing the hard things. And so, and then you also hit a huge one. Control what you can control. You just hit it where you're like, dude, I did a 4-minute Tabata. But somebody's like, I don't have time. You don't have time. You just sat in a drive-through McDonald's line for 30 minutes. You don't have time. If you would have prepped a meal that 30 minutes, you could have done a walk. Heck, you could have walked to McDonald's. I don't care. Got McDonald's and left. That's time you can use on your side. Yeah. I had to watch my newest show of Netflix. I don't care. Go get a treadmill, put it on the iPad, and watch Netflix there. That's a win. Like, I let my son play the Switch at the gym with me in the morning at 5 a.m., but he knows he has to be on a damn treadmill walking when he's playing his Switch. He walks for 30 minutes on a treadmill playing his Switch. That's our give and take, right? If he's not going to exercise with me, but he wants to play the Switch, and he did it on his own. One day he was like, "Hey, Dad, can I go walk on the treadmill?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." What father doesn't want his 9-year-old kid to go walk on a treadmill at 5 o'clock in the morning? Right as people are walking into the gym tired, they see this kid on a treadmill. I'm like, yes. So I saw him one day with a Switch, and I was like, hey, dude, I'll let you bring your Switch to the gym if you're going to walk on the treadmill and play it. Like, that's perfectly fine. He's like, okay, cool. So I would love it if he worked out with me. It'd be really cool, but he's doing his thing. My daughter, on the other hand, dude, she loves to do the workouts with me. She loves to do pull-ups with me. She's a freaking beast. I love it. But, like, that's just where I'm at right now with my kids, and it's crazy. Yeah. Crazy tangent, but yeah.
No, you're spot on, because it's kids emulate the parents. And my daughter I've got a garage gym. Like, I got, some bumpers and barbells and selectorized dumbbells and shit. But she wants to do stuff. So I give her a PVC pipe. I show her how to snatch and clean and jerk. And then the other day she wanted to do some stuff different. So I was like, do a farmer's carry. So I gave her like 25-pound dumbbells and sent her down the neighborhood. And I was like, hey, this is going. And the other thing I think it builds is resilience and mental toughness, for lack of a better term, because, especially like a farmer's carry, there's nobody around to help you. What are you going to do? Are you going to sit there and cry and whine, or are you just going to stand? All right, this is going to suck for a minute. Pick it up. Let's go. And then you surprise yourself and you're like, wow, okay, I did that. It's such a great analogy for life, because life is going to, especially on a squat, right? It's going to push you down. What do you have to push back against it? What are you going to become?
Yeah, carrying lifts have been one of my favorite exercises, because one, obviously going through the TAC-PO selection, it's a staple in their community, but it's also taught me like it's a great exercise because you can drop it whenever you want. Like, that is one of the biggest mental challenges for this exercise. That's why I love the exercise. You could drop it whenever you want. So you're in control of the rep, right? Like curls and all that, you can sort of, or like a bench, you can sort of be like, oh, 5 reps, cool. A farmer's carry, when you're walking, the only person that's ending the exercise is really mentally you. It's not the amount of reps when you stop. And so those ones I do them all the time. I'm down my street. We're just getting ready to move into a new house, and my daughter, because she knows we're going to have like a detached garage for my gym, she goes, hey, Dad, she wants to buy her own equipment that she sees on TV, like this little workout set. And I was like, man, that's so cool. Like, I'm so pumped. She wants to put a pull-up bar out there. And I've said it a lot in a lot of my stuff. They do what they see, not what they hear.
Yep.
Like,
100%.
that's huge. And I don't think a lot, it's crazy.
Yeah.
What,
I'm a
do you
big,
remember the book
go
that
ahead,
you have to bring, or?
Oh yeah, I've actually got my daughter reading it right now. So it's Energy Bus by Jon Gordon.
Wait, did you tell me that one
And
last
it's
time,
just,
or did somebody else tell me it?
I did. Do you want a new one?
No, I
I got
just heard
new ones.
about, somebody told me about it on another podcast too, but yeah.
Oh, I think another one that I loaned out to a friend is called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Tremendous book. Essentially, it is doing the small things day in and day out. It's like compound interest. Um, Great little snippet from the book. He talks about like, hey, if we're flying two separate planes from LA to Maine and I'm off by 1 degree, we're not going to notice that until like, New York, and then I'll end up in New Jersey, but you'll end up in Maine. So the trajectory of what you're doing, you need to be on the path, but you have to continue making those right small compound things, because then the interest accrues over time. So
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I got my mindset book that I'm reading right now. I like it. It's basically on growth and fixed mindset. It's what it's shown me is, even though I portray myself as a growth mindset guy, there are areas in my life that I've noticed fixed mindset that I can shift. And that's one thing I've learned about this book that it talks about is one person isn't always growth. It's not one or the other. Usually there's different areas in our life where we may be fixed mindset on, we may be growth mindset on. So it's choosing and noticing that beforehand. So that's what I bring. Man, this hour went by super fast, dude. I'm not going to lie.
yeah, it did. It went by quick. So thank you for having me back on here. I think this went better than the first one, actually. So
I knew it was going to, because I knew there would be areas that I wanted to get more explanation on. We talked about, and we talked about a lot. The only thing we didn't talk about, which I'll cover, you hit last time, you hit the know, like, and trust. I think that's what it is, right?
mm-hmm. Yep.
So understanding that trait that I put in there. Let's see.
Yeah.
Other than that, we got the book. We got the questions I wanted answered. We talked about leading from the front and the rear, because you talk about like when you're in these new roles, sometimes you got to lead from the rear to establish it, see what's going on in the community, and then you can start leading from the front and jumping out front and doing that. We talked about SERE stuff, which is always fun to throw in there. Building relationships, talk about that. One thing you mentioned last time, which I'll reiterate here, is we're never always the smartest in the room, which you probably hit a couple times when you were talking about soaking in a lot of info earlier in your career. Mm-hmm. Hey, and this even comes for as we're more experienced in our life. We should never think we're the smartest in the room, and that comes to you being around all the SERE guys up there, me being around where I'm at. That's just a mindset to have when it comes to anywhere we go.
Yeah, the one major infographic that I show, because I'm doing this presentation for the Washington State Clinic NSCA here in May, and it's called Simplifying Training for Tactical. And I think it's slide 3. I have the Dunning-Kruger effect. So, for people who are not familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's essentially when you first get into something, you think it's easy and so simple and you know everything. Oh, yeah. And then essentially the longer you stay in, the more you realize you don't know, and you're like, oh shit, I need to catch up. But yeah, everybody should check that graphic out. Just go to Google and type in Dunning-Kruger.
All right. Do you have any last parting shots? Anything you want to throw out there we didn't cover? Or, yeah.
If you're a dad, get out and lift. And if you're concerned about doing the wrong thing or, not knowing what to do, just get out and do something. Ask for help, because most people that are coaches or fitness professionals or whatever are more than willing and very happy to help and guide people. They just want to see people be successful. So I've only ran into a small group of people along the way who have been jerks about it, but everybody's been cool. So
perfect. With that being said, for everybody that listened all the way through, thank you. If you didn't take notes, I'll be mad because even though it's our second time, I still took another page of notes. And if you have questions, I'll leave Travis's info in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to us, connect with us, let us know if you have any more follow-on questions. With that being said, everybody enjoy your day. Travis, just hang on. We'll let it finish recording, and we'll catch up.